Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
Welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
All right, we just got done with the All-Star weekend. It felt like a firing squad listening to everybody talk about the All-Star game and the format and the presentation and all that. Like, real quick, so everybody knows. First, let's just redo the entire opening.
Yeah. Let's just keep it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. 1, 2. Welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
All right, we got a good show today. It's middle of the All-Star break. Actually, I think we're getting ready to come out of the All-Star break. But we're going to talk about the big three storylines heading out of the All-Star break into the final third of the season in the playoffs. What do you need to watch? What do you need to be paying attention to? But before we do, All-Star weekend just ended. Heard a ton of, it seemed like a circular firing squad where, some people really liked the format, others didn't, presentation, Kevin Hart. Like, there was a bunch of different opinions about a bunch of different things. Real quick, what was your takeaway from All-Star Weekend, the format, and what they should do moving forward?
The best part about, NBA discourse is that everyone is level-headed and doesn't jump the gun or jump the shark on anything. And I thought that we definitely kept that.
And rarely criticizes the product.
Yeah, rarely criticizes the product and isn't prone to hyperbole at any point. No, I think that the format was a really good idea. I was actually one of the few proponents of it after watching last year's, not this season, last year's Rising Stars game. It encourages more competitive play. I think that's really good. I think there was a lot of criticism of it, about the Rising Stars team into the All-Star game. Well, guess what? That was the best game of the three, just hands down. The one, the OGs versus the Rising Stars team. I think that being said, the way it was presented was the presentation from TNT was bizarre.
I think that one of the things about All-Star Weekend is, like, you think about the Super Bowl, you have like a massive Super Bowl halftime act, a massive pregame show, a lot of celebrities around the Super Bowl and all that. But like, the NBA Finals aren't that way. Like, the NBA Finals are just basketball.
Yeah.
And I think the NBA kind of tries to have that moment during the All-Star game. And I have a certain appetite for that. Like, I actually find Kevin Hart to be funny most of the time, just having him like randomly running around out there, like interjecting himself into the game, like constantly, and sometimes for way too long, I think was a bit much. I don't mind like musical acts, maybe, to begin, or like if you want to take a break halfway through for something like that, that's fine. Like, and, they tried to like do musical acts that were central to the Bay Area to kind of like, honor the Bay Area's contribution to music and entertainment and culture and all that stuff. Like, that's fine with me. Make it sort of like a halftime show in the middle of the entire thing, rather than just having very, very, very long produced segments between each game, and in the final game, stopping the game halfway through to do a very long, protracted obituary or eulogy for the TNT crew.
I think that there's a lot of things they can do different.
Yeah, I think you could actually make the team smaller and have more of them too.
100%.
So, but anyway, all right. So heading into the final third of the season, getting ready to gear up for the playoffs. I think most of the action, when we talk about what are the three most important things to watch or the three most interesting storylines, I actually think, particularly after the trade deadline, most of the action's in the Western Conference. But we've got two, I guess you'd say two. Number two is going to have a lot of teams packed into it. We got two in the Western Conference, and then we've got one in the Eastern Conference we're going to get to. But let's start where asses are on the line. All right. You don't get to pull off a trade like the Dallas Mavericks did at the trade deadline, where you send your 25-year-old generational superstar who is a perennial MVP candidate, won the scoring title last year, has been 5 times All-NBA, brought you to the Western Conference Finals twice and the NBA Finals once before he was 25. You don't get to trade that guy away and then not have the pressure on you, especially not when the trade is for a 32-year-old injury-prone center. And I know a lot of the talk whenever you would say, like, for a 32-year-old injury-prone center immediately became, well, AD's been available the past, season and a half or so. And it's like, well, okay, that's fine. What happened 2.5 quarters into his Mavericks debut? He's down indefinitely. The Mavericks don't know when he's going to be back. It looks like the closest possible
could be
date.
out for the year. He could be out for the year.
Yeah. Soonest possible return date seems to be about a month from now, which is about the same for Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. So it looks like the Mavs could be closing out the season with Dwight Powell at center, and he's not even going to be back immediately. So I don't think you get to trade a generational 25-year-old superstar to create a 3-year window and then lose one of those years and the pressure not be on you. So my first vote for most intriguing thing to watch coming out of the All-Star break is the Dallas Mavericks. What do you think?
100%. I think that this is a team where we've seen, because of the Luka trade, perhaps the most public fan revolt against against an organization mid-season. And
the closest thing I can even think of is the Clippers when the Donald Sterling stuff happened, and that's a very different situation.
Yeah, and yes, 100%. And that wasn't the product on the court. That was the owner. Yeah. But this is a fan revolt against the team mid-season, and I think that we've gone over and relitigated the reasons why that decision was peculiar, but we have a situation where a team mortgaged its future under the assumption, the false assumption, I believe, must say, that the move they made for Anthony Davis is going to make him better than now. But the reality is, one, they got an injury-prone player who's already out injured. But the other thing was the team they were adding him to had already been ravaged by injuries, and so mortgaging.
And who was next up on the timetable to return?
Luka.
Yeah. So it's like who's the best player involved in the trade?
Luka.
Both him and Anthony Davis were injured with very, very similar timetables to return. That's the other piece about the Anthony Davis is available now type stuff. When you traded for him, he was injured. Yeah. And it was a related injury to the injury that has now put him out for indefinitely.
Yeah.
So Luka's next up to return for the Mavs. So you're going to get back the best player you have in your team. I mean, the most talented player in franchise history. He's not as accomplished as Dirk yet, but he was the most talented player in franchise history. He carried you to the finals last year. He was an MVP candidate last year, and you're set to get him back heading out of the All-Star break and down the final third and into the playoffs. And you ship him out.
Yeah. And not only that, the stated reasoning by Nico Harrison for why he did this was that this made them better in the now, and they had a 3-4 year window, and that was all he was looking at. So who gives a shit if Luka's 25? That was basically what he said in the press conference. One of the things that's been under-discussed about how bizarre that logic was at the time, the Mavs were currently ravaged by injuries to the extent that there was a lot of discussion in the media about whether the Mavs were going to have enough bodies, have enough players to be able to be competitive this year, or if this season was already a lost season. So bringing in, and what we've seen is that, the move is backfired in the immediate because Davis has gotten hurt. But what makes that even worse is that the team right now is completely, as you mentioned, depleted. Gafford has gotten hurt too. We're talking about Powell starting at center. And, right now, the current starting center is Omax Prosper, who is, 6'10", but he's a small forward, or a power forward at best. We have, they've made other win now moves. That they traded away
Grimes.
Quentin Grimes for Caleb Martin, and
Who was also injured when they
who
traded
was
for him.
also injured while they is still currently injured, and the team is incredibly depleted, and so we are facing a very real potential that this team, because of injuries, this is a team like full health. This team is either one or two in the West, probably in my opinion, even at this. But there's a very real potential this team misses the play-in.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
this team, I think the thing to keep in mind about this team too is that if you go back to the beginning of the season, we've had them as 1 or 2 in the Western Conference in terms of when you're fully healthy, who's the best team in the Western Conference. I've had them as the best team in the Western Conference the entire season when fully healthy. Their starting 5 had the best net rating of any team that in any starting 5 that played over 100 minutes together, and that was Luka, Clay, Lively, PJ, and Kyrie.
yes.
So when Nico Harrison said, we're making this trade because it's a win now trade that makes us more capable of securing a title this year, you know, you say it makes you better, and it's kind of like, well, better than what? Like you were in the finals last year. You fully healthy. You were one of the best teams this year, if not, arguably the best team. I mean, you're certainly better situated than you were last year before you went into the playoffs to make a deep playoff run and win the finals. So I think it was a bizarre idea that this was a win now move, but it was the move that he made, and he did say, as you pointed out, that the point was to win now, and in the immediate future, the next 3 years was all he was concerned with. So if we're talking about 3 years, and the Mavericks are currently sitting in the 8th seed. They're sitting in the 8th seed with no timetable for return for Gafford, Lively, or Anthony Davis. It's hard to imagine as teams ramp up play and start to compete for them final play-in spots. It's hard
Yeah.
to imagine the Mavs not just not ascending. It's hard to imagine them holding ground. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But that's why, to me, the most pressure is on Dallas. You made a win now move, which means you need to win now.
Yeah.
And you leverage the future of the franchise to make that move. Nico Harrison's ass is on the line with that move. All right. And so that's why they're the most intriguing storyline heading out of the All-Star break, in my opinion. Last thing I'll say about the Mavericks. Things could be bad in that you're fighting for a play-in spot. That's not worst case scenario because you get the play-in spot and then you theoretically get healthy heading into the playoffs, and suddenly you can have a fully healthy Mavericks team in the playoffs, and they can become a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. I am not arguing that the Mavericks are not a really good team right now. I am simply arguing they were a really good team before. I think that you, at best, are just as good as you were before, but in different ways, and your future is far less bright now as a result of this trade. That's why it was stupid. But they could sneak into the play-in, get fully healthy, and then show up in the playoffs and cause a lot of problems for a lot of teams. Don't doubt that. A worst case scenario would be they miss the play-in. And we're going to discuss that in greater detail in a moment. And then the worst case scenario is that Luka goes the fuck off in LA while you miss the play-in. I think that the Lakers have a hard ceiling. I think that they can be a good team because I think defensively they can be good schematically. I think they have holes in their defense that they're going to have to sort of live with. Offensively, I think the pairings of Luka and AR, Luka and LeBron, Luka and AR, I think that offensive trio in your backcourt is a goddamn problem for anyone. And I think it will continue to get better over time. So all that said, I think there is a strong possibility the Lakers could look a lot better than the Mavericks going down the backstretch. And I think there's a strong possibility of that because of how banged up the Mavericks are. And if that's the case and Luka looks good and the Mavericks missed a play in, that's a worst case scenario for Nico Harrison and the Mavericks.
Yeah, the Lakers are a jumbo version of what we saw with the Kings either 2 or 3 years ago, where they're this team that has immense offensive firepower right now, like immense, and right now it's theoretical because they're only 2 games into Luka, but I'm no doubt that they'll be able to come together. They have just, in terms of just offensive weapons, they have that, but they're total lack of rim protection, total lack of size size and depth at the center position outside of Jackson Hayes, and Hayes is just he's just too skinny to defend some of the bigger, girthier centers in the league. So they're going to be fun, but I agree with you on the ceiling. This Mavs team.
But to be clear, the Lakers have virtually no pressure on them this year because this trade had absolutely nothing to do with the 2024-2025 season for the Lakers.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And this is, this is when there's, this is a bonus year. Like they're playing with house money right now. Like if they go far, 100%. Then great. If not, they're building for the future. The Mavs have the highest variance of any team in the league in terms of ceiling and floor, and that is due solely to injuries. But they have been absolutely ravaged by injuries right now. Kessler Edwards is listed currently as their starting power forward on their team. Like that, that is.
It's been that way the whole year.
Yeah, it's been that way the whole year. There's not been a single point of the season where they have not had major key rotation pieces out. It has gotten so bad that even before the Luka trade, there was talked about this amongst the Mavs fans of this being a cursed season. And the reality is that at full strength, this team theoretically could absolutely win the West. The problem with that is that we are talking, and this is from the timeline the team has given us, and they have given us timeline that say they're going to be reevaluated instead of they're coming back. Reevaluate usually means that there's going to be an additional amount of time out afterwards. You are looking at AD, Gafford, and Lively all coming back potentially into the play-in tournament or just right before. That is a situation where you're going to have, at best, your team is going to be full strength, having built no chemistry together, and being thrown into playing hyper competitive winner take all games for the opportunity to play the best teams by record in the Western Conference in the first round. This is the likelihood for me that this team, and this is not because of talent, this is just because of this current injury situation, the fact that they made major moves midseason and they're going to need to build chemistry, and they're incorporating a lot of pieces. This is a team that, just because of the way they decided to do this, because they decided to make this trade, they probably threw the season away just because of the injury crisis that's happened.
Sure, but the other problem for the Mavericks, in my opinion, is I'll use the Nuggets as an example. Anthony Davis is a great basketball player. He's not a good basketball player. He's a great basketball player. I'm not diminishing.
First ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I'm not diminishing AD's value. Luka is a generational basketball player. When you look at what you have to accomplish to get through the Western Conference, and you look at a team like Denver, for example, Kyrie has been able to have some success against Denver. The thing you have to understand about that, though, is Kyrie was paired with Luka.
Yes.
Which means that Kyrie was getting the second best defender with a defense that is schemed, tilted to stop Luka.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyrie is attacking a compromised defense with the point of attack defender being the second best defender.
I agree.
His efficiency, his ability to get those points consistently against a team like Denver will be diminished. You're not going to stop him completely. Kyrie is also a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a great basketball player.
You can take the ball out of his hands.
Yeah, because he's smaller. He's smaller in stature. You can force the ball out of his hands. And then you run into the Mavericks' bigger problem now, which is they have a lack of ball handling and playmaking. And you force the ball out of Kyrie's hands. The other problem is you say, well, no, man, we just traded for a first ballot Hall of Famer in AD. We're putting it in his hands. Yes, but against a team like Denver, while AD is a first ballot Hall of Famer, you don't even need the fucking ballot for Jokic. Like, Jokic is just a no-brainer Hall of Famer. And so you have traded to sort of focus your team. I actually don't think AD or Kyrie are first option players. I think they're both elite second option players. I think you have two A's on that team, two Robins with no Batman. And I think you have made a conscious decision to center the team around a player like Anthony Davis, who's never been able to overcome since Jokic stepped into his own. He's never been able to climb that mountain. And you've said that the point of, the win now, the theory behind this win now move was that AD made you so much better defensively. Well, I will let you go back and do the research into the last two Western Conference playoff matchups and all the regular season matchups between the Lakers and the Nuggets. But AD's defense had a marginal, if non-unmeasurable, impact on Jokic. So I'm still not entirely clear. Like, I think they have one of the better rosters in the Western Conference. But playoff basketball is matchup dependent. And if you get the wrong draw and you end up facing off against the Nuggets, the Dallas Mavericks are going to learn what the Lakers knew. AD is great. He is not enough to build your team around and get you to the promised land in the Western Conference.
Yes, 100%. I mean, the one of the bigger issues is the Mavs have become a team that has gone from being able to impose the style of play they want through Luka to a team that now is, it's actually a very versatile team. It's deep. It can play different styles, but it is now like they're going like they don't dictate the terms of the game anymore. And I think that
fully healthy, they're going to try to bully you is what they're going to try to do. And their theory for the Jokic thing is going to be, it's not going to be just AD. It's going to be Gafford and AD or Lively and AD.
I think bullying Denver is very hard. They are like, the Lakers, that has been the problem the Lakers with AD have run into repeatedly is that Denver is huge. Like they are like, and they're not only huge at center, they have a 7 foot tall small forward. Like they have like, you have to be a Goliath of a team across the board in the way, and you also have to have like all NBA level point guard, defense at the point of attack to really get Murray out of the game. Like, because that's not the issue. The other thing is this team is now slow. The Mavs team, like Jokic is not just a bruising interior scorer. He's going to try to run. He's going to try to get start fast breaks. There's going to be a lot of that. This Mavs team has athletes, but Jokic is going, like, whoever they match up on, Jokic is going to run them up and down the court. He's going to pull them out of the paint. He has ways, that he now has someone you can hide him on defense. Like they're just going to put him on Gafford. I can promise you that. They're just going to be like, Gafford, if you want to get a couple of rim runs, that's fine. Jokic is just going to roam him and like take a break on defense. And they're like, I think that the Nuggets have some matchup advantages. They're going to speed the game up. I think that they have some issues they can cause perimeter matchup issues for the Mavs. Like Michael Porter Jr. is significantly taller than PJ Washington and like it's very comfortable just shooting over smaller defenders. Washington is like good at usually like guarding those type of players, but like that is like I think that Porter Jr. is going to be a significant issue for him. He's just tall and long.
I mean, and I think you can go through and you can find a number of different matchup problems where like you've got a team like Memphis who can put a 7'3" guy on you with Jaren Jackson Jr. playing help defense. Like they can match up with you. Like I just think that the Dallas Mavericks are looking to play the game other teams are playing when their style of play, which they were able to impose upon teams last year, proved to be the superior style of play in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. I think also if you're looking, I'm not saying this is the right point of view, but if you're looking at this from Nico Harrison's point of view, it's pretty clear to me, looking at this, that he made this move under the assumption that the only threat to Dallas is OKC, because this is kind of like, this was a move that's like he's just gonna try to grind OKC in the dust with these two bigs that like he's gonna slow the game down. He's gonna have Gafford and Lively go against Chet. He's gonna have AD bully Hartenstein. That you're gonna have Kyrie who's gonna be able to break down the defense like this. It's not a bad, like, in terms of that matchup. I have questions for why he felt he needed to make a matchup adjustment against the team he beat last year convincingly in the playoffs. But
also have a question about why you felt like you needed to go get another center when you had two starting caliber centers already.
There's a lot of questions, but like if we're looking at this from a sunk cost perspective of like the Luka trades out the window, we're just looking at the roster. The roster matches up. It makes sense if you're just solely looking at this as a one-on-one contest against OKC. Like, this team may not be better matched up against OKC, but it's decent. Like, it has advantages against them. Taking Luka out of the equation or like that makes sense. I don't think it makes sense. I think that, as I mentioned before, this makes them a team that's like of a much higher variance in terms of matchup to matchup. Like, this team does not match up well against Boston.
That's what I was about to say. Like, it does not improve your odds at all of winning a championship.
No. You're going to have significant issues against teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have, like, they're comfortable playing two bigs. You want to play two bigs against them?
Yeah.
Have at it.
Yeah, they're fine. Yeah. And they're going to stretch the floor more than they're able to stretch the floor.
Significantly more perimeter scoring power than you. Like,
100%.
Yeah.
It was a bad decision for 1,000 different reasons.
The full-strength Knicks are, with Mitchell Robinson, we'll talk about them later. This is the type of team they're going to love playing against, because they're the
Bucks. There are a bunch of teams that are just happy with doing it. Like, that's my point. You've built your team around something that doesn't give you a unique advantage in any of these matchups, and just the question becomes whether or not your two big pairing is better than their two big pairing, particularly when it comes to spacing. And I don't think Anthony Davis spaces the floor better than really any of them. Giannis is much more of a threat driving the ball. Jokic is much more of a threat shooting the ball. Karl Anthony Towns much more of a threat driving and shooting the ball. Like, the spacing is just screwed up.
Like, it's going to really, like, they're huge, and like they can just overpower some teams. We saw that against the Rockets. But
AD's not a bad mid-range shooter. He's streaky. And so, like, if your game is predicated,
rely on AD to win a 7-game series.
No, that's my point. That's my point. Is you get into a playoff series and your game is predicated upon AD's ability to space the floor. Yeah. And I think you're going to regret that decision, because he's going to have one game where he looks great doing that and another game where he looks terrible.
That was the entire Nuggets theory of the case in beating the Lakers. They were like, you want to take your little 10-foot jumpers? We'll give you wide open 10-footers, and that will be your offense, and we will win. Yeah, and that is.
But when you look at the other teams in the Western Conference, right? So, like, the thing with the Mavs is they're in the 8th seed, all right? Yeah. And they're fighting really for a play-in spot. And due to their health, I don't think you can make the argument that they're fighting for a playoff spot. They're going to have to demonstrate an ability to win down the stretch without any bigs.
Absolutely not. They're playing at this point. That is the realistic assessment of this team.
When you look at the second thing on our list, the number 2 thing to watch coming out of the All-Star break, and you look at the teams who are fighting for playoff and play-in spots. Like, right now, when you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th spots, all that, you're looking at the Rockets, Lakers, Clippers, Timberwolves, Mavs. And then it goes into the teams fighting for those last 2 play-in spots, which are the Kings and Warriors. And then you have the Suns and the Spurs. To my mind, the second most intriguing thing to watch coming out of the All-Star break and into the final third of the season in the playoffs is how all this is going to shake out. Because I think there's a great deal of variance that could happen here. Like, for example, when you look at the Rockets, the way the Rockets have been playing lately, the fact that they don't have a guy that they can turn to who's just a consistent number one scorer who can carry that team, that team could plummet or they could go on another little winning streak. I have no idea what's going to happen with the Rockets. When you look at the Lakers, there's so much variance with what could happen with that team. The Lakers could look brilliant offensively and porous defensively with very little rim protection. Or you could argue that, well, the Lakers are going to look brilliant offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at their defense in the 10 or so games without AD, with the exception of one game, it's been incredible. And the one game where it was bad, they didn't have Jackson Hayes, they didn't have Gabe Vincent, and they didn't have Dorian Finney-Smith, all of which are on the floor for defense. So, like, you could see a Lakers team that's efficient offensively and defensively, or you could see a Lakers team that's good offensively and good defensively, or great offensively and terrible defensively. There's just so much variance with what they could be. When you look at the Clippers, if the Clippers have Kawhi back to full strength and we're now pushing Norman Powell, who should have been an all-star this year, into the third scoring option, and we're putting size and playmaking on the floor along with incredible defense with Ben Simmons, I think that the Clippers could be a problem for a lot of teams heading down the stretch. Just a question of whether or not, Kawhi is going to be able to stay healthy and available. Minnesota seems to be trending up, but a lot of that seems to be that they play better without Julius Randle on the floor, I guess is a question for another day. And then you get into the Mavs. All right. There's so much variance with those teams, but I do believe, with the exception of the Mavs, that the Rockets, Lakers, Clippers, and Minnesota are all playoff teams. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
All right. So if we're just going to set those teams aside, then we're talking about the Mavs, the Kings, the Warriors, the Suns, and the Spurs. That's 5 teams fighting for 4 play-in spots. Right?
Yeah.
Which 4 teams out of those 5 do you think are most likely to secure those 4 playoff spots? The Mavs, Kings, Warriors, Suns, and Spurs.
That's a really good question. I think that I would definitely say the Warriors. I would say that I would probably have the Mavs in there. And right now, if I'm going to be brutally honest, I would have the Kings and the Spurs.
So you got Warriors.
I have the Suns not making it. It's just
You got the Mavs making it.
I have the Mavs.
So you think the Mavs are better than the Suns without a big, other than Dwight Powell, who should be back in a reasonable period of time.
I think the vibes in Phoenix are going to be really bad for the remaining of the year.
That's fair.
Where I'm coming from. And I think the Mavs have enough of a little bit of a cushion that.
How many games are they ahead of the Suns?
A whopping 2 games. It's not fully equal because they're 30 and 26, and the Suns are 26 and 28. So they've won. They're a little over. They're basically 4 wins ahead is the best way to put it. Yeah. And but of those teams, I think the most interesting team to me right now, out of that's of the group that we talked about, is absolutely the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs have been have been a surprise given considered the betting odds at the beginning of the year in terms of their performance. They have they added De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline. The first major move they've made to build a title contender around Wemby, and they have now played mean, they played like 3 or 4 games, with Fox, and what we saw was that we saw the potential of the Fox Wemby pairing. Even though they haven't had a lot of practices together, you saw that when you saw that the potential for the pick and roll is there with Fox's speed, Wemby's ability to both dive to the hoop, in theory more so than practice right now, and pop out to the 3 point line. This is the first time we've watched Wemby have an elite scoring option next to him, and yet we also saw that right now the team is still struggling. And the biggest issue that they're facing right now is that even with Fox, the Spurs are, basically that they're winning and losing depends on how Wemby plays. And what I mean by that is in wins this year, Wemby is scoring 28.8 points a game. He's averaging 9.6 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 3.6 blocks. In losses, he's averaging only 20.5 points. He's averaging 12.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 blocks. So there is an 8.3 points per game difference between wins and losses. So when Wemby puts up numbers that are MVP level, 28, 10, 4, and 4, and he's shooting 54% from the field and 42% from 3 point line, that's MVP numbers across the board. The Spurs win. When he produces at like a borderline all-star level, basically the numbers he was putting up around last year, they lose. And and he's 21 years old. He's got a lot of talent, but he's very inconsistent. The effort wanes game to game. There's been some signs over the course of the year that he is wearing down. The Spurs are asking us an immense amount from him. He has to basically single-handedly hold up the defense while being their primary scoring option. I think that will change with Fox. It's a lot to ask for. But also, the Spurs were on a really good run, and in December, that was Wemby's best year. You saw that, his best game probably ever was the Christmas Day game against the Knicks. And following that, since basically the start of 2025, we've seen a dip in his performance. In February, for example, he's averaging 22 points, 12 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and less than 3 blocks. And he's only shooting 30% from the 3 point line. And a lot of that is due to the fact that teams have started to defend him very physically, and it gets him visibly frustrated. They're putting, the book on Wemby, if there is a book, is to put a 6'8", 6'9", like a power forward who can move well, who gets underneath Wemby and tries to get really physical with him and deny him the ball. Wemby's natural inclination when that happens is to just bomb away from three. He stops. He gets more passive. He doesn't play. He tends to play outside the arc. The Celtics were doing that against him. I was at the most recent game before the All-Star break, and Wemby just wants to shoot threes in that regard. And he'll periodically attack. And when he did decide to attack off the dribble, he scored because he can.
Let me ask you this about the Spurs. So I do think that I would have the Spurs as the second most intriguing team to watch in that bunch. I'd have the Warriors as the number one.
Yeah.
And my reasons for that are just I think the pairing of Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry it is as intuitive, or maybe less intuitive, but like when you see it on the court, it works well.
Yeah.
As De'Aaron Fox and Wemby. The issue that I have is that I don't think, given their age and experience in the league, I think you can expect Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler to be more consistently who they are than you can with Wemby, who's 21.
Yes.
And then my second thing is, I'm sorry, man. The Chris Paul starting minutes with De'Aaron Fox is a bizarre goddamn thing. I don't understand. There's only one way.
Not work.
There's only one way to explain it. Chris Paul was guaranteed starter minutes.
Yes, I mean that's pretty clear at this point. It's causing two things. One, the Spurs are putting out very tiny starting backcourt lines, and Chris Paul at this point is unable to stay in front of defenders.
Small that aren't defensively inclined at all.
And he's now being asked to guard two guards. I mean, Derek White was just roasting him, like just destroying. Like Derek White looked like he was the best guard in the NBA, and that's because
Yeah.
he can shoot over Chris Paul and he can get to the rim at will. It does not work. It doesn't. He is the coaching. The coaching with regard to Paul is a big issue with the Spurs right now. And like in possessions in the end of games where they need to stop, he's continuously in the lineup and he continuously gets targeted, and and teams score on him at will. It's a problem, and it's also magnified by the fact that the person behind Paul, Stephon Castle, has been breaking out, and in the last month or so. Like this, in February, Castle's averaging 18 points a game, 3.3 assists, and 3.7 rebounds, and shooting 51% from the field and 42% from three. He's getting fewer minutes per game right now than Chris Paul.
And he's elite defensively.
Yeah, he's elite defensively. His physicality and size is a great match for Fox. They need that because Fox is on the smaller side. He is the only Spur outside, like before Fox drives, he was the only Spur who can consistently get to the hoop when he drives. The rest, Vassell will try to score, but Vassell's natural inclination is to shoot mid-range jumpers, contested mid-range jumpers. Castle has the strength, he has the ball handling ability, the shiftiness, the deceleration, that's his go-to guard, and the athleticism to get to the hoop against anyone he wants. And it is the Spurs need to make that change. They need to put Castle in the starting lineup, and if not just for this season, for the future. Like this Castle, Fox, Wemby is the base of this future Spurs team.
100%. 100%. I think when I look at, because I do believe that the Lakers, Clippers, Rockets, Minnesota pairing, those sort of four middle of the road playoff teams, and the first play-in team, I think those teams could jump each other, leapfrog each other, fall behind, but I think they're all going to be bunched together.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm fine with setting them aside. When I look at the Mavs, I have the Warriors as the most intriguing team in that next bunch. I like the pairing of Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. Draymond's great at finding guys on back cuts, baseline cuts, people who move off the ball well. Draymond's one of the best at it. Jimmy Butler's good at moving off the ball. Jimmy Butler brings that defensive presence. He also forces defenses to pay attention to him, which creates a little more space for Steph, and you've seen Steph play better since Jimmy Butler's gotten there. And I think it makes it to where in tight games down the stretch, Steph Curry isn't the only player on the floor who can score. So I actually think that the Warriors will leapfrog the Kings and the Mavs.
I think I would agree with that. But quick thing circling back to the Spurs as we cut that off. What do you see as their ceiling right now?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Is I think that when I look at, so like if I move now, it's Rockets, Lakers, Clippers, Minnesota in no particular order.
Yeah.
And then the Warriors coming in, and the Mavs are now the third play-in team. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the Mavs compared to the Kings, Suns, and Spurs. All right. Fully healthy, there's no question who the best team out of that bunch is. I mean, you could argue the Mavs fully healthy are the best team out of the all the teams I've just mentioned.
Oh, yeah. It's the best.
But they're not going to be fully healthy for a while. And so I actually think that if you take Chris Paul out of the starting lineup and you play Castle, Barnes, Fox, Wemby, and Vassell, and you bring Champagne and Paul and Sohan off the bench, I like the Spurs more than the depleted Mavs.
I would
a lot more than the depleted Mavs. I don't think I think Max Christie is a really good young defender who's a under talked about part of the Mavs Lakers trade. He's under talked about because I don't think his ceiling compensates for what you lost in Luka. But he is a good player who is a good defender. I don't think he's fast enough to stay in front of De'Aaron Fox.
No.
Well, no one is, right?
Yeah.
Like no one is. Um, I think that Wemby versus Dwight Powell, unless Wemby is just going to sort of capitulate to any degree of physicality, in which case I don't even know that I'd put Dwight Powell on him. I'd probably have PJ Washington on him, just have him shove him out to the 3-point line and,
Yeah.
force him to play from there. But like if Wemby, I have a theory about the Spurs that puts them over the top to me if you take Chris Paul out of the starting lineup. He's the first domino that has to drop. And this is my reasoning for it. If you take him out of the starting lineup, they'll start winning more games. If Wemby senses that they're winning more games, you'll get more buy-in from Wemby. He'll feel more pressure on himself to compete and to perform and to deliver for the team. It may take a couple of games where people are looking at them and saying, like, we were in a position to win this game, and quite frankly, the reason we didn't was because PJ Washington shoved Wemby out to the 3-point line, and he was happy to acquiesce to the Mavericks' defensive strategy and play shooting guard, even though he's 7'4" or whatever, right? Like I think that Wemby will hear that for a very short period of time, and then I think he will adjust. And you'll get that competitive edge from Wemby, and he'll start to buy in. But, like, the truth is about Wemby, I love Wemby. I think Wemby has the potential to be one of the greatest players to ever play the game. But you see the attitude Wemby brings to the goddamn All-Star game where he's frustrated that his team loses.
Yeah.
You see the attitude in the Netflix documentary about the Olympics that he brought to the Olympics. You hear the comments where he's like, the rest of the world needs to be afraid and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, buddy. Well, don't bring it to the All-Star game. Bring it to every game down the final stretch.
Yeah.
And I think that if you get Chris Paul out of the lineup and Wemby brings that attitude, and I think Chris Paul getting out of the lineup and the Spurs winning a few additional games will get that buy-in from Wemby, and then you can start to get that attitude from him. And I think the Spurs then my list of teams goes Rockets, Lakers, Clippers, Timberwolves in no particular order, with the Kings coming in next. And then the Spurs leapfrogging, I'm sorry, not the Kings, the Warriors coming in next. Then the Spurs leapfrogging the Suns, the Mavs, and the Kings. And then now we're talking about the Kings and the Mavs battling it out for the final play-in spot.
Yep. The Spurs, here's the thing with the Spurs. Wemby has to play through physical contact. He has to be willing to try to punish defenders. He has to be willing to take the physical play from smaller defenders, which refs are allowing continuously, and they have allowed since the dawn of time. That's just the way ref in the NBA. They will allow a smaller defender to be more physical with a bigger defender. That's just, and he just has to get over that, and he has to punish him down low. He has to make that an emphasis. If they do that, the Spurs will make the playoffs.
Yeah.
If he continues to follow the same path he has done since the beginning of the new year, the likelihood is that they're going to flounder. I think that the All-Star break is going to be a good reset point. I think the team is going to be able.
Well, they also needed practices and stuff
they needed
like that.
practices, and I think that I have confidence in Wemby doing the right thing. He has repeatedly shown in the first 2 years of his career that when he faces an obstacle, he overcomes it. And you have to remember this is his second year in the league. That these are natural progressions, but this is all dependent on him. He needs they need him to play like a big man. He needs that. That is what he is. Right now he has gone on an extended. He's gone on since New Year. He's been playing like a guard. That was. When I was in the stands in Boston, there was a fan behind me who was just talking about that. He's like, that's what it is. He's trying to play like a guard right now. He is, and that is going to be the eternal question with Wemby, is he's going to have to come to terms with the fact that he has guard skills, but he is 7'6", and he's going to have to understand that that's going to be the primary part of his game, is that, taking advantage of and playing in the post will unlock the rest of what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, my thing, so like the way this would end up shaking out, if I'm correct, is that you would have Minnesota and the Warriors playing in the first play-in game.
Yeah.
I think that is I think that's actually a good game.
It's a really fun game.
Yeah. I I don't even know who would win it. I think that you have the potential there of seeing a Denver Minnesota rematch in the first round of the playoffs if Minnesota wins it, which would also be fun. But then that would have the Warriors going on to play most likely the winner of the Mavs or either the Kings. Who do you think of those two teams? If the Spurs were to secure a play-in spot, would you have the Mavs or the Kings being the most likely team to secure the final play-in spot?
Kings, because of the
All right.
Mavs' health.
Yeah. So I think that if the Kings were able to secure that final play-in spot, I think the Spurs would win that, which would then set us up for a
That
Spurs
would be
versus Golden State
a
game.
circus
And
of a game. Kings Spurs after the trade, and like Fox
yeah,
not necessarily left
yeah.
Sacramento on the best of terms. Like,
Well, I also think that's what that's one of the things I was about to bring up. Like I think from the NBA ratings point of view, it would actually be really interesting because you would have a play-in game between the Kings and the Spurs, Fox versus his old team. I think the Spurs, if they play the way they're supposed to, would win that game,
yes,
which would then set the Spurs up for the Wemby versus Chet first round playoff series.
yeah, that would be a heck of a series too. I would,
Boy, and you would have that rivalry in it. It'd be great TV.
yeah. Wemby's first playoff series against the chosen, the the chosen team by NBA analysts. I think it would be. I mean, that'd be a heck of a game.
Oh, and Chet and Wemby bring it when they play each other.
Oh yeah, yeah.
With the exception of that one game earlier this year where Wemby did not. But other than that, like they really bring it when they play each other.
We don't talk about that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we don't mention that. That may have been one
So
of the
I mean,
bottom moments.
what do you think of it shaking out that way, where we're looking at Rockets, Lakers, Clippers being your playoff teams on the back end, your first play-in team being Minnesota, and the order in which the rest of the play-in teams would shake out would be Warriors, so they would play Minnesota, and then it would be Kings and Spurs in the second play-in team. Do you endorse this message?
I mean that. I think it's definitely like in terms of probability, I think it's up there in terms of like the way it turns out there. I think that like these are the teams that are the healthiest. These are the teams that all have higher upside. Every single one of them, aside of Minnesota, has made major additions at the deadline. I mean, like the Kings added Levine. The Warriors added Butler. The Spurs added Fox. Like, these are all teams that should be making strong pushes. And Minnesota, I mean, Minnesota is like they conference finals last year. Like they're going to be in this.
They're going to be in the mix somehow.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a lot of variance with how they can play based on how they, what lineups they use. And if they're willing to come off Julius Randle being in the starting lineup and they give Naz Reid more burn, or even if they don't take him out of the starting lineup and they just change the minutes that they're playing, I think that the Timberwolves are actually a much better team than they've been in the first half of the season. Now I'll say this: if the Spurs keep Chris Paul in their starting lineup,
they're not making playoffs.
The play-in teams are going to be Minnesota, Dallas, Sacramento, and Golden State if they keep Chris Paul in this.
It's just not tenable. It is too small of a backcourt. It is, Paul can't guard, like he's a backup point guard. He does not have lateral quickness anymore. He's 40 years old. That's just a fact. And you can play him. He's a very good backup point guard.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's against teams are just that's the entirety of the offense.
But if you bring him off the bench with Sohan, then you've got the defender next to him that you need to sort of shore some of that up.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, then, so our first most intriguing thing to watch coming out of the All-Star break is the Dallas Mavericks and all the asses on the line out in the Big D. And, the potential for the Lakers to exacerbate that problem by outperforming expectations there. The second most intriguing thing is going to be how the play-in shakes out in the Western Conference between Minnesota, Dallas, Sacramento, Golden State, Phoenix, and San Antonio. And I think that there are two teams who can really increase their ceiling just by making minor lineup adjustments. I think that's Minnesota, shifting the minutes allocated to Julius Randle and Naz Reid, and the Spurs putting Chris Paul in a backup role. The third most intriguing thing we have on our list is in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
The New York Knicks have been absolutely they're a devastating offense to have to face. They are a really, really, really good offensive team. Their defense has struggled at times, but most of those struggles have revolved around the lack of rim protection. Teams shoot really well in the paint against the Knicks.
Yeah.
And the Knicks should get back Mitchell Robinson, who is a good rim protector, which will enable them to bring Josh Hart off the bench, which should infuse some energy into the bench unit.
Yeah.
And they should get OG Anunoby back. To my mind, this is going to make the Knicks overall a better offensive team, in that you're going to see the bench unit with more efficient and better production in the non-Brunson cat times. And I think you're going to see them perform better defensively with Mitchell Robinson. And I think if this is true, it vaults them into the conversation with Cleveland and Boston. Am I crazy?
No, it's 100% the case. The Knicks defense is floundering right now for two very specific reasons, because they actually have some very good defenders in their starting lineup. Mikal Bridges has been a little off this year, but he's consistently been a high level defender at the wing. OG Anunoby's one of the best defenders, period, in the league. Josh Hart's a good defender. The problem is the other two players that play in the starting lineup are Jalen Brunson and Cat. Brunson is a defender who needs a rim protector to be effective because he's so small. Like, he needs to funnel. He's good at funneling, but that's about it. And he'll get some steals. He needs someone to funnel to. Cat is actually an elite power forward defender. If all you're asking Cat to do is wrestle with someone and he has a rim protector next to him, we've seen like teams just last year with Rudy Gobert. You can build a top ranked defense in the league with Cat in the lineup. You can absolutely do that, and it is consistently good. He, more than anyone else on that Minnesota team, was the reason why Gobert struggled. I mean, that Jokic struggled last year, because his physicality was what wore down. Like, Jokic was just running through Gobert when they had one-on-ones. You like that, but he's not a rim protector. He needs to have that next to him. And so right now, what's happening in the Knicks offense is that teams are being funneled to Cat, and he's being asked to do the thing he is absolutely the worst at on defense. He's absolutely the worst at. So it's just teams are just they're scoring at will in the paint. You add Mitchell Robinson to that. You put Brunson into his natural position as a defender. You unlock Cat because you focus what he's trying to do. You hit that, and suddenly this defense is going to vault, like, not just what you would normally see when you had a good defender to line up, but it's going to vault, I think, to probably in the top 10 range, lower end of the top 10. Additionally, it's going to help. Like, there's suddenly going to be a team that can just that can play a bruising style of basketball. That right now they can do that a little bit, but with both Cat and Mitchell Robinson is limited on offense, but he is one of the best offensive rebounders in the league, if not the best. He's won playoff series for the Knicks before by just physically dominating opposing centers. He did that to Cleveland, where he dominated not just one center, but two of them, in Mobley and Allen a couple years ago. He's also elite at guarding one-on-one big, some of the bigger bigs in the league. He, in the playoffs last year against the Sixers, they were starting Hartenstein, but they had to basically, vault in Robinson because Hartenstein was getting physically overpowered by Embiid, and he guarded Embiid so well that Embiid deliberately injured him out of frustration. Yeah. Literally, that is what happened. That is why he's currently out. Is that Embiid deliberately injured him, and so I think that this simple move, the fact that he's coming back, is going to it's going to allow the Knicks to reach another level. Right now, they are a very
well.
Good
it's also going to allow the Knicks to be what they were originally designed to be. Like, 100%. I think that's the kind of the thing is, like, I was listening to Stephen A. Smith the other day, and he was talking about how, in his usual hyperbolic way where he was like, it's an embarrassment that Tom Thibodeau of all coaches is allowing the Knicks to be a bad defensive team. And it's like, well, I mean, he's not allowing it. It's just that like the anchor of his defense isn't there.
I'm picturing Tom Thibodeau have to go out there with a bat and be like, "You think we're a bad defense? Shea Gilgeous, come over here, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like, you know, I mean, I think that the Knicks, I think that the Knicks are title contenders, fully healthy.
I completely agree. And I mean, right now,
And I think that's good for the NBA. Like, I think that
100%.
last year's Knicks team was so much fun to watch.
They play so hard, and they have some of the more likable characters in the league.
100%. Brunson and Hart
Bronson.
and Cat and all.
Yeah.
Like they're a like Mikal Bridges. They're a likable bunch.
Yeah.
Like and Tom Thibodeau. Like, and I think
Mitchell Robinson. I mean, this is a guy who lives with his high school coach because his high school coach, his wife passed away, and he was struggling. And so Robinson, who hadn't seen this guy like in a decade, basically moved him into his house. Like, you know, these are all like really cool and like fun and like, you know, people that are really that people are going to be able to gravitate towards.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the things that to me makes this really intriguing. And the reason I would say it's the third most intriguing thing to watch coming out of the All-Star break, it's not just the fact that the Knicks are title contenders. It's that they're a fun team that when they're in that position and they're contending and they're competing in playoff series, they're captivating. People tune in. People want to see them, like, because of how they play. They're a fun team to watch. And I think it's good for the league. I think it's good for the sport, and I think it'll make for really, really, really good TV.
It's also going to be a team that age-wise and in terms of career-wise, this is going to be a team that is poised. That's the word I'm looking for. Poised to be an elite team for at least a 5-year window.
I agree.
Brunson's 27, 28, Cat's 28, 29, 30. You know, they're all entering their primes. They're all players that have skill sets that will allow them to excel as they get older and the athleticism diminishes. They have a coach they all like playing for. You know, like this has the.
They're in a major media market that's going to get a lot of attention. So like it is a fun group that like really just has the ability to get fans to tune in and buy in. Like they're a team that, like, when your team's not playing well or your team gets eliminated, it's very easy to start rooting for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, last year they were one of the more, like, you watch them and they're a bunch of gladiators and they all adore playing the gladiator. I mean, and so you watch them and they are really endearing to watch because it's like when you watch youth ball and like you may not even know the kids or there's someone else, but that kid who's going out there and is like gutting it out, that, you know, people like, that's just fun to watch and you're proud, you know, and you're like, that kid's tough, and it's, you know, it makes for captivating basketball. And they're also one of the things the NBA needs. They all have a personality. They are not cookie cutter dudes. They have personalities. They're fun. They're approachable. Like, you know, like they're not like, you know, and so the NBA needs more of that. And, you know, and that is the type of thing that like they're going to be people that fans who don't know them are going to be able to connect with them because they're going to be able to identify and, like, you know, understand them as individuals and not just players.
Yeah. All right, well, that kind of sums up our list. Top 3 things to watch coming out of the All-Star break: Dallas Mavericks, and whether or not Nico Harrison can pull this team and Jason Kidd can pull this team sort of out of the nosedive they're in. I'll give Jason Kidd a shout-out. I think they've outperformed a lot of expectations given the injuries that they've had. But make no doubt about it, asses are on the line in Dallas after making that Luka trade. You know, as a sort of subplot there, watching the Lakers and how well Luka performs out there, which could just pour fuel on the fire in Dallas if Luka is tearing it up. And then really just sort of how the playoffs and the play-in are going to shake out, with, you know, most likely the Rockets, Lakers, and Clippers, and Timberwolves being locks. And then it's the Mavs, the Kings, the Warriors, the Suns, and the Spurs competing for those final spots. And you've got some big moves that have happened in the Western Conference with De'Aaron Fox going to San Antonio, LaVine to to Sacramento and Jimmy Butler to Golden State. And so it's going to be fun to watch how all those moves shake out. And of course, AD to the Mavericks. And if they can, make that play-in team and then play-in spot and then get really healthy and get their full lineup out there, they could be a problem for any team they would face in the play-in or the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And then finally, the Knicks. Getting Mitchell Robinson back, getting OG Anunoby back, and really getting healthy down that final stretch. I think that the Knicks are not just contenders, not just a problem, but they're just fun to watch. And so we're really looking forward to the back stretch and most definitely the playoffs. And you can look forward to tuning in to the King of the Court podcast as we cover this backstretch in the playoff run. We're going to provide really good in-depth analysis about your favorite teams and players. So don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, take care.
Peace.